Let's talk some more about stress because it's stressful. The two hormones that are released at the end of the HPA axis are adrenaline and cortisol. The effects of adrenaline include increased heart rate and heartbeat. Your pupils dilate to increase your field of vision. There's a constriction of the arteries in your skin and your gut, particularly in the gut, because you don't need to be digesting food when you're running from mastodons. And the blood vessels in your legs, in the arteries of your legs, dilate because the blood is going to be flowing there in order for you to be able to run away from that mastodon. Cortisol suppresses the immune response. What happens as a result of this is that you have inflammation that can attack healthy cells. You are increasingly susceptible to illness, and you're unable to heal as a result of this suppressed immune response. Also, blood sugars get redistributed throughout the body because your cells, in response to running from this mastodon, need energy. There are a lot of different types of stressors, even though we don't have those mastodons out there. Here's a list. Individually, they may not present a problem, but over time, as they collect, it begins to wear. I like this. I said I wanted to go over it with you because while we're not running from mastodons and we're not concerned about our neighbors taking away and invading our property and ruining our crops, we sit at computers. Now, for me, more than ever, yet our DNA has not changed. Our stress response has not changed. It reacts as though we are still running. I want to go over that response with you because while we don't have physical stress, we have sedentary stress. So let's look at what's going on and the difference between that hunter-gatherer and the sedentary worker. The response of blood vessel constriction was good for the hunter-gatherer because it prevented them from bleeding out. But in the sedentary worker, that blood vessel constriction over time can lead to hypertension or high blood pressure. The increase in blood sugars as a result of the cortisol being released provided energy so that the hunter-gatherer could run, could protect, could move. But the sedentary worker, is not running or protecting or moving, and these blood sugars can build up and over time lead to type 2 diabetes. The increase in belly fat that evolved in order to provide energy for the hunter-gatherer during periods of famine. You've heard of the phrase feast or famine. They would gather food, they would eat food during periods of feasting. They would increase belly fat so that they could survive during periods of famine. The sedentary worker does not really experience a lot of famine, so those calories continue to build up and accumulate around the abdominal region. We call this intra-abdominal or visceral fat, which we'll talk more about, that increases risk for heart disease and type 2 diabetes. There's also an increase in pulse and breathing rates, which provided the hunter-gatherer with an impetus to be alert. But for the sedentary worker, palpitations, hyperventilation, anxiety, panic. What do you want to add to the list? The general adaptation was not discovered by Hans Selye because we've been stressed long before Dr. Selye, but he developed this 3-stage model of the body's response. He called his theory the general adaptation syndrome, which we're going to take a closer look at. He has 3 stages. I have seen models where a 4th was added that had an optimistic ending and that of recovery. In the first stage, it's the alarm phase, that physical or psychological response. Remember, our body responds the same way. Our DNA is programmed to respond in the same way, whether it's physical or psychological, whether it's real or perceived. And these are some of the responses to the alarm. Mobilizing our resources to fight or flight. The adrenaline, the cortisol, our sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight response. The resistance phase, your body's still on high alert for danger, but it really wants to return to normal. This is also known as the adaptation stage, where we have increased heart rate, decreased digestion and immunity as the body adapts. body wants to renew energy and repair damage, with the goal being to restore homeostasis or balance. So we're still on alert for danger, but desperately want to return to normal. However, if normal doesn't come, we progress to the exhaustion phase. In other words, if the resistance stage isn't followed by recovery, this is when the body is most vulnerable to stress-related disorders. Our reserves become depleted, muscle tissue can be damaged. The body just can't keep up with the demands of the stressor. The immune system's depletion leads to increased susceptibility to disease. The blood vessels can become more rigid, less elastic, thus affecting heart and blood flow, because the heart wants to push blood through the vessels, but if these vessels become rigid and the blood can't move through as fast as it wants to, it increases blood pressure because the blood is slamming into the blood vessel walls, into our artery walls, leading to injury and inflammation. We'll talk about how that increases plaque when we discuss heart disease. I told you that I was being optimistic here, so hopefully there is a recovery stage. All of these responses then return to normal or homeostasis. These stages are the general